playing cards from the war with Iraq, this time on the Everything's a Primary Source podcast. Want to bring history to life in your classroom? With Everything as a Primary Source to go, you can borrow real historical artifacts from the last 200 years, shipped right to your school. It's hands-on history, paired with ready-to-use lesson plans and classroom activities that make the past come to life for you and your students. Whether you're teaching the Industrial Revolution all the way up through the Communication Revolution, there's something in our collection for every era. Visit everything-history.com/EPS to go and start transforming your teaching today. That's everything-history.com/EPS to go, because history belongs in your hands. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we construct history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture. I have some teachers in training from Plymouth State here right now, and you're all at different levels of getting ready for your next step in the profession of being teachers. And here I am with some primary sources. This one, it's a deck of cards with the Iraqi High Command as the different cards. This is the second deck of cards I've talked about today. The other one was from the Columbian Exposition of 1893 in Chicago. Very different set of cards, separated by about 110 years. What's interesting is cards are still being used in both time periods. The other one was all about each card was a different building at the actual World's Fair. Nice and peaceful, and about learning about other parts of the world and celebrating your achievements as a country and in the 400 years since Columbus. Here we have, and I heard from somebody else that this was not for public use, that this was something that was circulated among troops or something, but that each one, what is on each of these cards?
Well, a number.
Various Iraqi leadership around the Second Gulf War.
They all seem to be military.
Yeah, that's what
And it's quite fascinating because it almost has echoes of Vietnam to me, with the cards, the death cards that were placed on body. It feels much more like almost like a list in a sense. Obviously, it would be different if it was not coming from America, but since it was, from my understanding, is the same as yours, that these were spread amongst troops, and it's kind of almost this list of heads they want, essentially, which is pretty intense, to be honest. Yeah. But it's a very interesting way to go about it.
I'm curious if there's any. So the aces seem to be the top, because this is. It looks like Saddam Hussein's son is one of the Ace of Hearts, and so there's a ranking to that.
That was my question. I was wondering if they all correlated, and with the royals too, I was wondering how those all matched up just to the others.
Do you think so? The question I pulled is the ideas and behaviors that this conveys. By making a deck of cards, how many number cards are we talking about in a deck? 52. So, I mean, what does that convey right there about?
There's a lot of Iraqi military. There's a lot of figures in the military that have some sort of power.
Yeah.
Or a very small number if you compare it. I mean, 52 compared to. So, I mean, and by putting them on playing cards, does that trivialize things at all?
That's what I was saying. It's almost gamifying what they're doing, and I think obviously there's aspects of history to it, but if they're putting them on a deck of cards that people are typically using for a game, there is some sense of kind of gamifying that idea, and I'm not sure. I was going to say, especially with correlating the suits to the power rankings of all of them, I think that also kind of adds the nuance to, like, you know, it's like the players of a game. You know, each of them hold different ranks, the king, the queen, things like that. I think it's interesting.
I like that term, gamifying, and it's, as far as this goes, so I know that this is going to date me, but I remember exactly where I was when the second invasion of Iraq took place in 2003. Correct? Yep, that's when it was. I was actually visiting a friend of mine in college out in Montana, and we were watching live on TV the ground war commencing. And on, you know, Fox was the channel that was on a lot, and it had the eagle swooping in and turned into an F-16 or something as it was flying by, what you would expect from Fox. And leading up to the invasion, they had a big countdown because just like the first Gulf War, there was an ultimatum: is either surrender the weapons of mass destruction or surrender, or we're coming in. And they had a clock similar to what you would see on New Year's Eve or countdown to the Super Bowl. Almost gamified it, right? Exactly. But I remember being at my friend's, he had a dorm that was like a suite, right? So there was lots of guys that lived there in a common area. In the common areas where the TV was, they were watching the news, but it's also where they were playing these first-person shooter games. Like, I think Call of Duty was out by then and a few other ones. And I remember being kind of bothered by that because it was like, you turn on the news and you got basically the same view. Like, you saw military vehicles, you saw these guys, and I was like, I don't know, does that trivialize what's actually happening? But then I came to find out that a lot of troops enjoyed playing those games in their off time. So I'm like, is it kind of like disrespectful to them that we're playing in our safe dorm rooms thousands of miles away from where they're going to war? You know, where's the...
I think it's the lighting, making sure you understand, like, the context of what you're doing, you know, like, understand that there are real things going on like that, and it's not always a game. And I think that we've talked about this in some of the classes, is as much as it does trivialize and gamify, it also desensitizes to an extent, that makes it framed in a really negative sense, but you're looking at it in the video game, and then you see it on the news, and then it's not, you don't think too much of it because you were just playing a game doing the exact same thing. Right. And I think that it can be, I think that's only if you're thinking about it or very literally. I think that a lot of kids and people playing these video games kind of understand, like, the context of what they're doing and how it is a game, and then there also is the real life. So there's that line that's divided in between life and online. But I think it is really just important to make sure that there's context around what you're doing and making sure that, like, kids just know that is a real thing that's happening, not necessarily something that they're going to come in contact to 100%, but, like, it is a real thing, you know?
Right. And I will also say, like, I think, to your point, I mean, it's common even the entire time, at least in the 2000s, that there were soldiers in the Middle East and that there are soldiers in the Middle East. They love playing video games, and I'm sure that's the exact same place where these come from, in the sense of, like, this is our entertainment, but we're bringing this is like all aspects of life to them. Like, that's their life. And so even in their entertainment, it's showing through. So to me, it's not, I don't see it in the same, like, gamification. Obviously for us back here, maybe, like, you know, using that, just selling that in a corner store would maybe be a different story, but as something we kind of talked about, it was most likely just for the troops kind of thing. Yeah. It makes perfect sense because that's their life, that's their day-to-day, so why not bring that into everything, like, with it, you know, playing games.
This might be a funny take too, but specifically using those for troops and then, like, actual people playing actual soldiers playing video games, it's almost in a way of, like, dark humor, I think. Yeah, like, right. You know, making light of a really bad, like, a hard thing to deal with. Like, you know, the cards, those are obviously some pretty interesting people in history. The video games we're dealing with, those are obviously really violent occurrences, but it's, you know, making light of the dark.
The first thing I thought of is it's kind of like a black comedy.
Yeah.
Black comedy movies where, like, kind of matter-of-factly just show something that's, like, a bit evocative and striking, but put onto something that's trivial and a little bit comedic. Like,
a playing card. What can you do with a playing card? You could play poker, you could play blackjack, you could play go fish, you can do all sorts of things. And yet, very serious, like, you know, right. You got, like, and you mentioned Vietnam before, but I think we would be hard-pressed to find similar cards in World War II.
Right.
World War One. I mean, playing cards have been around for hundreds of years, even maybe the Revolutionary War, and all the way through some version of this, either among the troops or in just the population, where you have, like you said, this is like the world I'm in, so I'm just going to use this. And I think, therefore, in the 2000s, given all the other options, this is actually very benign, right? Like, this isn't really all that, what could have been being used in the time period. At first, it's like, whoa, man, it's kind of, but then you're like, well, compared to what?
Right, we got to remember, this is post 9/11 as well, so this is like some of the peak of passion against an enemy, against a common enemy. So I'm sure if we had this conversation in 2003, we probably wouldn't feel so passionately one way or another. I think
I have another deck of cards that from the same era, which has like all the Bush administration people on it. It was like pro their administration. And that one I think was sold as a public, buying playing cards thing. And I mean, in a way, you could look at this as almost like, because each card has ascending value. Is it in its own way a bit of like a nod to the hierarchy of power that existed among the Iraqi high command? I mean, it might be a little bit of a respect to the enemy kind of thing.
Yeah. I laugh at us a little bit too. We were saying that was a small number, a large number of cards to fill, and then you're like, that's actually a really small number for the amount of, like, I was like thinking of it in the context of American history, and then you mentioned like the Bush cards. Like, there actually are so many things that we could be doing with that. And like, there's probably more than just the deck of cards can fit, and I just think that's fun.
Well, it's just like when they don't really do it with war so much, but like Monopoly boards that for a different town or a city or I remember when years ago I used to work actually around the same time as this. I worked at a organization with I worked one-on-one with kids, like teenagers and stuff. And one time we had this idea of like, let's make our own Monopoly board out of an old one for the town that we were in. But then we realized like those first couple spots are like the crummy part of town. So we had to decide like, which streets go here? It's like, which ones get that? And then the ones at the end of cars, so like the nice part of town. And it's like, maybe we shouldn't do this. Because then we have to like rank.
Gamifying to a sense.
Right.
You get a little.
And it's like Monopoly might not be the best, whereas the game of life, on the other hand, is a little bit better because you just kind of go through your life and not as much of.
Don't got to rank the roads or anything.
Right. You don't have to say this one's best and that one.
Stay away from. Yeah. Now I want to get my hometown Monopoly game and look at
see where you live.
Where I'm in it. Like,
you a hotel or a house?
Like the rent is $25 or but yeah, I guess games, and I'll give a plug right now for the Strong Museum of Play, which is in Rochester, New York, and it's also where the National Toy and Video Game Halls of Fame are. And they have, on display they have a lot of things, but in their archive, you name it, there's a board game for it. And war is just the scratching the surface. Like, they have everything has been made into a board or card game or one of those games with the little like pinball floating around it, and you have to there's a game for everything. So on the first hand you're like, it's bad taste, but then you're like, well, people have always been doing it. It's just a way to maybe
make sure you do it the right way.
Right. Don't get to the point where you can't distinguish between this is easy to distinguish between reality and cards. You have a major problem if you're like, all I see is
all I see is
hearts
games
and clubs and stuff like that. Well, thanks for taking the time. And
of course, thank you.
Audio comes out.
Happy we were able to come check this out.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything as a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you're listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.